getting things done. This is really, now there is an official, which we'll talk about in a minute, there is an official getting things done, probably even copyrighted and things like that, because it's a book called Getting Things Done. This is not that. It's some of the ideas from that, but it's that thing was so monumental to so many people that there's sort of this like getting things done movement that is, sort of grown beyond that. I think the guy that's the author still sort of drives it. There's conferences. He gives input to people on it. But really, it's just sort of it's one of those things that it got a little bit of a life of its own. So people started saying, that's really the key. It's not about being busy. It's about getting things done. And so that's what we're going to talk about. A lot of this are things that it's a sort of a personal sharing of how I do it. These things will not all work for you. It depends on, a little bit about your mindset, a little bit about your work environment, a little bit about the kind of work you do. But hopefully along the way, there'll be a couple of things that'll at least be, even if they're not exactly something that you would adopt, it'll give you some good ideas for yourself. So let's start with where does getting things done come from? And it was originally, the author, as I mentioned, his name was David Allen. His book is Getting Things Done. He's got a couple of versions now. It was originally a much older, it's like, I think 10, 15 years ago. You can see it on Amazon. He's also got, like any good author, there's the book, but then there's also the book plus additional bonus material and study guides and things like that. The key to what he did is, how do you get things done, is he walks you through a system for moving things from a pile of not done to done in some way. And that's really, it takes it to the most basic. You've got tasks, like an inbox, and the goal is to essentially move them to the outbox. They're done. Now, it has a formal process as he goes through the book, but it's one of those things that's been adopted by many people along the way. So there are getting things done sites and suggestions that are, variations of a theme on the process that he does, which a good example is what I'm doing here. So if you're curious about the book, it does exist on Amazon. The full title is Getting Things Done, The Art of Stress-Free Productivity. The latest version came out about 2 years ago, and I think he had a little bit of additional commentary and things like that. You can see it's on Kindle. You can get it on audio as well, which I highly recommend for things like this to get. Spend the extra money and get it, especially unabridged. If you can get unabridged audio, books like this, of course, the 4-Hour Workweek we've mentioned in the past. Rework, which is the guy from 37 Signals that was like Basecamp and stuff like that. Those kind of books I think are awesome to have as an audiobook and play them, maybe a couple times a year. Just sort of listen to them while you're running, working, driving back and forth, because it's just these things tend to they're really good about firing you up and also about reminding you, hey, what's my goal with whatever it is you're focused on. The key to all of this stuff, from my point of view, and from what I've seen, is that and heard. So, if you go to anybody that does regular interviews, like Tim Ferriss from the 4-Hour Workweek, he does regular interviews, like weekly interviews with highly successful, highly productive people. Entrepreneur on Fire, John Lee Dumas does the same thing. His daily, talks to people, and not everybody, when it's daily, not everybody he talks to has got a gold mine of ideas. But at the end of the day, these people are productive. They're entrepreneurs. They've got more work than they know what to do. And each of them, as you listen to it, they have an approach, and it tends to be roughly the same. Everybody's a little bit different, but if you distill it to the essence, and of course the terminology sometimes, because they'll have different mentors that taught them this, so the terms may be a little different. The way they do it may be a little different, particularly difference between like a night person versus a morning person versus a middle of the afternoon person. So they'll adjust things a little bit, but at the end of the day, there's an approach, there's a process, there is some stability and consistency in how you do things. So the first thing, you got to know what your inbox is. So you want to have some system of tracking tasks. The easiest thing is pencil and paper. Some people just live on to-do lists. You can look at that. You can overdo that. For example, if you do something and then just so you can check that off your list, you write it on your list and then immediately check it off. Things like that. Not terribly productive. May feel good. You may get the extra attaboy of like, wow, I got that done, but you also wasted, whatever it is, 20 seconds writing it down just so you could pat yourself on the back. So, it's one of those things that you want to find what works for you. You want to find something that's easy as well. Because as you look at the next step here, part of it's defining the tasks. So you want to have whatever your tool is, something where you can quickly refer to it, quickly see what your list is, and not sit there and stare at the stinking task going, what was it why did I put that there? So, like I could have, as a task, schedule a meeting with Michael. And if I just put down on the list, Michael, and I come back a couple days later and I'm looking at my list of tasks to do, I'm going to sit there and go, what the heck was the Michael thing? So you want to make sure part of your system is helping you giving yourself essentially really the minimal amount of data so that you can look at it a couple days or a week or two later and see what it is and know what that task is without really racking your brain. And the time span that needs to live is based on how big and detailed you get your list. Honestly, if you're scheduling, if you've got a detailed list, even months in the future, you're probably spending way too much time planning and thinking about it. You need to keep it small, very manageable. Probably, I wouldn't say more than a week, a week or two out on sort of bigger granularity tasks, and very, the more granular stuff, maybe a day or two, because stuff changes. It changes. Things happen. You end up in a car accident, or you get stuck on a lunch line, or whatever it is. There's just things that happen that move stuff around. And then unless your pile of tasks is just that, it's just a pile of tasks that you're every so often going to go back to pull stuff out of it. If there's any sort of prioritization to it or any kind of timeliness to any of those tasks, you need to keep them in a short enough time frame that you don't end up constantly having to reschedule and rework the tasks that you've done. Once you've defined them, you got to schedule them. And actually, that's where I probably should have jumped ahead of a slide or two. So let me back up a little bit. For creating a system of tracking tasks, a couple of steps to do what I've just talked about with that. It's one, limit the input channels. And by that, I mean, your system should be sort of everything should flow into one place. If you're checking your phone and your desktop and your notebook and your whiteboard at home or something, it's too many places. There's too many ways that tasks can be tracked. It's fine if you've got something that you keep stuff on, so when you're on the go, you can write a task down real quick, whether it's pen and paper again, or maybe use like Evernote or something like that. But you want to be consistent. It is real easy with all the tools that are out there, because you have stuff like you could put notes to yourself in Slack. You could use Evernote. You could use Asana. You could use Jira, Confluence. I mean, you can Basecamp. You can keep on going. There's thousands and thousands of tools out there these days. So find the one that works for you. And if you've got two or three, flip a coin or whatever it takes to get yourself down to really just one or two. This is easier done when you control your life. So if you work for yourself or you work for a company where you're the chief decision maker, it's a little easier. If you work at a company where they dictate, we all communicate this way and track stuff this other way, then if that's in line with what you do in your normal life, great. If it's not, you may be in a situation where you have to have two or maybe three sources that or repositories for your tasks. But that's one. It's a personal thing. Evaluate it and see if you can, maybe what you end up doing, which is, I've done that a lot in the past, where what you end up doing is you just conform to whatever the business is, and you live in that world for both work and personal life until you move on from that company. Similar example would be like mail tools. You may go somewhere where everybody in the company is on Outlook. You need to be on Outlook. You may go to a different company and they're all on Lotus Notes. You go to another one and they're all on Gmail. It's sort of the same thing. I usually tend to go with the tools that I'm using the most, because work, let's face it, is most of your day. So you might as well, that's probably going to be the one that you should default to. You need to have a filing system of some sort. That's where I said, if it's just a pile of tasks, it can be really difficult. So have some way to organize them. Usually by order, there's some sort of like date order or priority. So it's things like, I've got to get this done this week, or want to get it done this week, or these are the things that I have to get done or I'll get fired, or divorced, or something like that. So assign a priority to them and make it easy. Not, again, you don't need a 10-point priority scale. I'd probably 5 would be the absolute max. I'd probably keep it down to 3, like, high, medium, low. In the book, Getting Things Done, he basically does it in a 2-phase approach. It's basically you just split it up into what needs to be done, what doesn't have to be done. So it's like, and so immediately whatever doesn't have to be done just sort of drops back into the bucket. So something like that's actually pretty good. And that's another way I've seen it that works really well is has to be done this week, has to be done today. And then, bonus, I'll get it done if I have extra time. Make it easy to sort through it. So again, however you've got it, if it's pencil and paper, then maybe you put a little mark or something that's easy to see. As you scan through your tasks, you can pick out the ones you need. Obviously, if it's an electronic tool, it should be pretty easy to do a sort by whichever column you want to sort by. Don't be afraid to use technology. Especially if you're using any of these tools like Asana or anything like that. Use some rules or use filters or something to be able to quickly get to the ones that you need to get to, whether it's sorting, whether you only show things on the day that they're due. A lot of like Asana and I forget, there's another one, Trello. They've got things, a lot of these kind of tools have the idea of like a start date for a task. And so you can have the task show up or in your inbox. It's just not going to show up on your report until you get to the start date. And there's others where they're like recurring tasks. So it's not going to, set up the recurrence of it until after you've done the first one. So if it was get an oil change for your car, you're going to have that task, and it's not, let's say you want to do it every 90 days. Well, it's not going to kick off the next 90-day one until the current one's done. So if you're late by 30 or 40 days, that's okay in a sense, because what it's going to do is when you finish it, then it'll start the timer for the next 90 days. And that's, again, something you can look at for the tools that you want to pick. So an example is rules for mail. As far as getting things done, probably the hardest way to get away, the thing that's the biggest time sink, and the thing that probably takes the most of our time is email. So, for me, I think the easiest way you deal with that, one, there's a lot of ways to look at it. It's inbox to zero and some of those kind of things where you keep the tasks that you need to do stay in your inbox until you get them done. Any of those emails that you get that are really just somebody saying okay, or ads or spam, or somebody that's sending a report that you're never going to look at, those things you just throw out of your your inbox right away. For myself, I like to keep track of all that stuff. I sort of do an inbox approach, but I like to keep track of all of it. So I will go through, and as I'm reading it, I'll end up filtering stuff out. I've got, I don't know, probably 100 filters. If you look at like this list on the top right, each of those rules essentially is redirecting certain addresses to a certain mailbox. So I've got all of these local mailboxes, like I think, again, probably 100, 200 local mailboxes that are based on activities, clients, people I haven't talked to in 50 years, things like that. And so I have all these rules that, depending on who those are, which you see in the bottom right, so you can see I've got just a list of emails, and in those cases it says if I've got emails from any of these 5 sources, then one of the first thing it's going to do is it's going to move it into this mailbox. And pretty much every good mail tool has something like that, whether it's rules or filters, however they call it. I would spend time doing that. I've actually built my list over probably now about 15 years, 10 to 15 years of maybe once a quarter having a very full inbox, and instead of dragging and dropping stuff into the various folders and trying to sort my way through and organize my way through emails, instead, as I touch each of those emails, I'm building a rule to move it where it needs to be. And so you can do this incrementally. You can, spend a little bit of time here, a little bit of time there. And the next thing you know, you've got a system that is, whipping your emails around just like, something coming out of the postal service or something like that, how they redirect mails. Ideally, you want to, each mail should go into just one mailbox. Ideally, like Google, for example, you can use the labels. You could have 100 labels on an email if you want, which is sort of useful. It's useful for filtering, but if you're actually looking for something, sometimes that can be a little bit confusing, because then it's like, did I put it in this mailbox? Did I not put it in this mailbox? So it does take a little bit of consideration to consider where you want to do it, how you want to organize it. But the key to all this is once you've done it, then you just work out of your inbox. You don't have to go digging around for stuff. And ideally, your inbox is staying reasonable. It's manageable. You're not like, for example, not to pick on my wife, but she's got an inbox that's got like 5,000 emails that are unread because she just hadn't gotten through that one inbox. So you need to do it on a regular basis, probably at least once a week, I would say. Sort of work your way through your inbox, throw the stuff away, filter the stuff, file the stuff that you don't need to do or you don't want to deal with, get yourself down to a short list, and maybe even go ahead and pull those out of your inbox and add them to, put them on your task list, whether it's wherever your task list happens to be. Defining tasks. Now, this is actually pretty key as well. So you want to take time, and this is where it's there's a sweet spot here. You want to take some time to create an outline or rough design of the steps for any given task. So if your task is do my taxes at the end of the year, then that's a pretty big, depending on who you are, it's probably a pretty big task. It's probably several hours. There's a couple things that are involved with that. So when you're looking at your task list, they should be manageable nuggets. You don't want you don't want it down to sand, but you also don't want these big, 50-ton bricks of work effort that you have to put in. So take a look at what it is. Look at the steps that are going to be involved. So for taxes, that's it's things like I've got to gather some paperwork. May have to dig through some receipts. I may have to go find some some data, like maybe I bought or sold a house, or did I have any big ticket items that I'm going to have to deal with? Did I have to get information from different, like if I've got, for example, investments, do I have to get some paperwork from them? If I've got insurance paperwork, do I need to get paperwork there and organize that? So you're going through those steps, assign a level of effort, again, keeping it pretty simple, maybe like a 1, 2, 3, so that you've got a way to, you sort of looked at it, you've said, this is what I'm going to do, and this is about how long or how difficult it's going to be on the steps. And then looking at those, are there any of those things that can be ignored, including maybe the whole thing? If it's something like do my taxes and it's August, I don't really need to worry about my taxes for months and months. So in that case, I'm saving my work in a sense, because I've got these couple of tasks that are related to that. I'm just going to throw them on some sort of a backlog. I'm going to throw them somewhere. Again, hopefully it's if I've got some rules and some filters, I've got some ways that I can go back to those tasks and dig them up at some point. But basically, I'm just saying I don't need to worry about it. In a general sense, the backlog items could actually stay there for years. I had a good example of that sort of backlog item. I had the goal or the task to convert all of my vinyl to digital music. That task sat on a backlog at the bottom of the to-do list literally for, I think, 3 years. And the way I did it was not necessarily the way I'd recommend it, because I would every week see that at the bottom of the list. It'd be like, yes, it's another week that I haven't even thought about digging out the albums and getting all that stuff to work. So it just, skipped ahead for a week, skip ahead for a week, skip ahead for a week. This could also be some bigger things like, there's things like, I've got to do some largish, maybe I got to do house repairs, or I've got to do something to, like an oil change or something like that. Maybe something a little bit bigger than that or longer term than that, where they're tasks that when you're looking at your list, you want to be able to remind yourself at some point, hey, don't forget you need to do this. And it may be stuff like, hey, I need to schedule a colonoscopy or something fun like that. I need to schedule time to go visit a dentist. Because in those cases, it's getting a little bit out of the getting things done idea. But when you put some of those big, almost like goals versus tasks, or, very big tasks that you want to get to at some point, the idea there is that maybe you can't get to them right now. So maybe a goal, one of the tasks is, schedule vacation in Hawaii. And right now you don't have the money, don't have the time or anything like that. But when it's there, what you can do is you can look at those tasks and maybe you can pull some small, make it a little bit smaller, pull some of those tasks out and get those done over time. So it may be stuff like, oh, I've got to set up a good savings account so that I can have the money for it. Oh, I've got to go research, where would I go? There's things like that as far as being productive in the long run, it doesn't hurt at all to have some of those things sitting on your backlog, really as reminders more than they are tasks at that point. And of course, with all these things, it's deciding on a priority. Anything that's not a high priority, just put it back on the backlog, because it's really there just to remind you that, hey, someday you want to get to it, but it should not be something that stresses you out where you look at it and you say, oh, that's right, I didn't get it done again. Like how I did with the, moving stuff from vinyl to digital. I didn't sweat that at all. It was literally something that after a couple of years, I had a vacation week or two, and I said, I think it's a good time to do it. And I remembered it because it was sitting on my backlog. So now scheduling work. Once you got your list, your repository of tasks, there should be some sort of process you've got for working that list, for working through stuff. A lot of people, it's either daily or weekly, where they'll look at the pile of tasks. They'll say, here's a bunch that I want to do this week, pull them off the list and put them into some sort of processing queue. And that may be as simple as, this may be where a multi-tool approach may help. So for example, let's say I keep all of my tasks in Evernote. Say I've just got a nice bulleted list in Evernote of all of these tasks. So just whenever it's like, oh yeah, I got to do that, I just put it down so I don't forget. Well, at the beginning of each week, let's say I sit down and look at that, and then maybe I'll just put down on use pencil and paper and create a little to-do list for the week. Here's the tasks I want to work on. Maybe somewhere I may even prioritize a little bit. Or if you want to stay within the same tool, it's just as easy to say, okay, I'm going to copy and paste, or actually I'm going to cut, these 15 tasks out, and I'm going to put them on my do it this week list. And then boom, I've already, moved off the repository. I've got a small list of tasks, and now I'm going to try to work them. When you are building that list, whether it's for a day or a week, the longer the time period, the more you have to worry about things like emergencies, tasks that high priority tasks that you may add, or tasks that may become less useful. I've got on a task this week to get an oil change for my car, and on Tuesday my car gets in an accident. I don't have it anymore. Well, don't have to worry about that task. And it's things like that, or a task may get done. There may be, if it's like work-related stuff, there may be changes in direction at work. You could get fired. You could, somebody else gets hired and now they're going to take over that. You have an intern come in. It's like, oh, good, I'm going to shove this list to them. So when you're building your list, you do want to allow for like ad hoc stuff like that. This should not be, never consider it to be in stone for two reasons. One, because you don't want to stress out every time you have to add something to your list, just because that may effectively be pushing something off your list, but that's okay. It's one of those things, if you'd known all of that at the beginning of the week, that thing that drops off or doesn't get done this week, you probably wouldn't have done it anyways. You would have not pulled it over onto your list. And the other thing is then you don't, so you're not stressing the fact that, oh, I've got to get everything done on my list. Get to the end of the week and you got a couple things undone and you want to, you need to go to bed that night, go to bed that night. Yeah, that shouldn't stress you out and wear you out. Saying that, however, set some goals and sort of keep score. What you want to do is and this is for yourself. And the idea here is to help you understand what your abilities are, what your normal week is like, what you can get done. So what you want to do over time is be able to get really good about pulling out a right-sized list of tasks, focus on them that week, get them done, and then repeat for the next week. And this is productive for you because you're getting stuff done, but also it's going to add to your ability to be productive because you're not as stressed about it. You get into a rhythm, and you get to promise people, you get to set expectations properly, because over time you're going to be able to say, I'm going to get this and this done this week. You're confident you're going to do it. And people get used to the fact that they're going to say, hey, when they say they're going to do it, they get it done in the right time frame. And if you say, I can't get it done this week, I've got too many other things, I can't get to it until next week or 3 weeks out, you can accept it. You're comfortable with that. And so is whoever you're promising it to. Because they're going to say, hey, I can try to put extra stuff on you, but you're probably not going to get it done. You're a pretty good designer, a scheduler of your time. And so, over time, you're going to be able to get the trust and respect to be able to set a task list that makes sense. It's aggressive, but doable for you. For example, I use Jira. I use a couple different tools, breaking my own rule, but it's basically because I haven't been able to figure out one that I haven't been able to get myself down to one or two. Pretty close though. So for Jira, what I do, as I've done for the last couple of years, I do 2-week sprints for myself. So my long-term bucket, actually, I guess my long-term bucket is a quarter. I'll look at a quarter. I'll say, here's some very vague kind of tasks and goals that I've got. And it's really more goal setting than it's tasks. Based on those goals and tasks on a monthly basis, I'll have some tasks that need to get done, but I keep those pretty loose and ill-defined. Now, every 2 weeks, I have a sprint. That's where I really am working on tasks. I have well-defined tasks. I have a backlog, and on any given sprint, that's how I do it. Is I'll go, and actually, I guess not 2 weeks. It's really on the 15th and the end of the month. I'll go look at it, and I'll say, what's my backlog? What have I got coming up the next couple of weeks? What do I need to get done? And what you can see here is on my roadmap, I've got these little mini projects. So that's for me to filter and organize my tasks. And each of those, I've got, and I sort of stagger those a little bit. So I've got some target dates that I've built myself for everything. And then, as you see here, I've thrown some bucket of issues for each of these items in the roadmap. And then based on that, when I get to, if I get to July 30th, I've got these things, or the sprint that's going to end July 30th. At that point, then I've got these 3 things that I know I'm targeting for July 30th. That means these tasks I want in this sprint, and they're going to be pretty high priority. Anything that goes into these other ones that don't finish until here, it doesn't end until August 24th, a month out. I'm not even going to worry about it. But it's no, that's not going to be on my task list. So something like that, you just have you're essentially moving it from a way out, a potentially inbox to an inbox, and then you work on them and move them out to your outbox. The goal of all of this, the key to all of this, is productive versus busy. And that's, it's stated in a couple different ways. I think actually in the Getting Things Done book, he labels it being productive versus activity or busyness. The goal in getting things done, and really what it should be for This is why it's almost like it's a lifestyle in a sense. The goal is completing tasks. It's not spending time. It's and this is a key to success. If you listen, this is, flipping back when I talked about how so many successful people have these kinds of approaches. It's because they're successful because their goal is tasks, is getting things done. It is, completing something. They're not going to say, I spent 10 hours working on this thing. They're going to say, I got this thing done. Because at the end of the day, the hours you put in, if you're a consultant or billable by the hour or something like that, yes, that does help you. I mean, that's how your paycheck is, formed. But your ability to be productive really, in a sense, has nothing to do with your paycheck. Now, if you're productive, your paycheck will get better over time. And that's really the key, because you're getting paid not to sit there usually. There's very few jobs where you're really just sitting around and, consuming time. They're not buying your time for no reason. They're buying your time for you to complete a task. If you get more tasks done during that time, then that allows you to, that frees up your time. Either you can do even more tasks and be more productive and of a higher value to that person. Therefore, maybe they will pay you more per hour, or you get done sooner and you've got free time to do other things. So like if you're a salaried kind of person, that would be ideal, and hopefully you would eventually get to that where, if you get paid $10 a day and you get all your work done in an hour, then you're doing a lot better off than the person that got their work done in 8 hours, or got to the end of the day and didn't get their work done. Because then, they're going to come back the next day and have to catch up from the prior day. So that's the first thing of productive. It's about actually accomplishing something. The way to look at this is always ask yourself, is this providing value? And that's in the context of the task. For example, I used earlier the idea of writing down a task just so you can check it off. When you do something like that, that's really busy work. It's not providing value. The thing got done. I know it got done. And that's it. Now maybe I have to report on it to somebody else, but unless that's it, unless there's somebody that's going to go back and read that list later, and I need to make sure that I've noted that got done, then, that doesn't really help. That's not providing value. And this is something where we've talked about this. This is where you can increase your value to your employer, to your company, in your job, is looking at the things you do on a regular basis and asking that question: does this provide value? Am I filling out this report and nobody ever reads it? And you may not know. It's a valid question to ask. So, have a question? Okay. It's something where, you may not be in a situation where you would know what the value is. That's what I'm saying. It doesn't hurt to maybe ask your boss or whoever it is, or whoever you're getting that report to, and say, I don't think does anybody actually look at this? And if so, they may say, yeah, they do. Well, dig a little deeper, and it's like, what is it? What are they looking for? Because it's things like that where you may say, I'm putting all of this extraneous information, for example, a status report, a list of tasks that you've done. You can make it very granular. You can talk about all the stuff you've done. You could have, a bullet list of probably 50 items that you do every day. Or it may not be as grand. It may only be 2 or 3 items that really matter, that anybody cares about, that you got done. Why spend the time listing the 50 items if you get the same value, the same value is provided by listing the 2? Being productive, there's always a goal. It always can be completed, and it can be completed or measured. So if there's not an endpoint where you can say this has been done, and it's not measured, you're probably not going to, I don't know of anything that would be productive about that. So for example, sitting at the poolside may be productive in a way, because your goal is, I need to chill out for a while. I need to, relieve stress. But if it's, sitting there playing with a fidget spinner and it's not really it's just killing time, the only measure there is just the amount of time you've killed. And if your goal is not literally to kill time, to just waste time, which almost by itself obviously would be not productive, then it's not productive. You don't have a goal. And this is where this goes back to, is it providing value? If what you're doing is not progressing you towards a goal, or it's not something that can be measured, that for example, like if I'm trying to cheat, like maybe my goal is something big, losing weight, let's say something that's a longer term. So let's say my goal is losing weight. Well, the fact that I exercise, every day, let's say, part of that is I can measure the calories that I'm burning, or maybe the strength that I'm, my increased strength. So there is something measurable there. There may be a goal as well to lose 20 pounds, to lose 50 pounds, but it may be a goal that is that's not as well defined, because it could be something like, I just want to be healthier. I want to lose weight. I want, something like that, where it's not a specific number, but at least it's measured. So in those cases, it may be productive. But if it's something where it's not producing anything, obviously not productive. And this is sort of a key, sort of like a tell for it. If you're really just counting minutes in a task, unless it's like, how long can I hold my breath, something like that. If you're just watching a clock, you're busy. You're not productive. So if it's things like, going back to grade school, where you would get they would throw some, maybe some worksheets at you after they teach the class, and now they've got 20 minutes to kill, basically, and they throw some worksheets at you that aren't going to be graded, that aren't going to be taken up, and they're just saying, go start working through these worksheets until the end of class. Well, you're just counting minutes. It's just, I'm just waiting until the end of class and then I'm done. So those are not productive, by definition. Busy work. This is it's one of those epiphanies I had a long time ago, and I think most people have had it at some point. Anybody that's worked a job, I think, has probably seen this at some point. When you're productive, time flies by. You're going to end up like in the zone. You're doing your job. You're doing what you were meant to do. And this may be as simple as, like, if you're working at fast food and it's a busy time where, a lot of customers are coming through, you're ringing them up, you're putting together the meals, you're taking the meals out to them. Time flies by. When it's busy and you're working, it's awesome. And then you end up sort of in the zone. You get in the rhythm of doing whatever the work is. In the IT world, we've run into this at times. You'll get where you've got a well-defined project, you're deep, you're into implementation, you're not getting interrupted by stuff. Your focus is, writing your code, getting the things to work, making them so they test out. You can fly through stuff. It's amazing how much you can get done because you're focused and you're in the zone. It's the key to the whole productivity thing, is not having these other things interrupt your life. So we've got this list of tasks, and one of these things, and now some things to help you out as you're going through the list. The overarching idea is avoid lingering. Know when your task is complete. Once you're done, you're done, move on. Don't sit there and and this goes back to something we talked about earlier. If it's done, it's done. If you have a perfectionist bone in you or something like that, maybe it's not done enough. And then what you end up doing is you go back to it and you revise it, and you start making additional work. You basically put busy work on top of a done task. So know when it's complete. Know when to walk away and say, okay, done. I don't have to go back. I don't have to reread it again. I don't have to review it. I don't have to color it again, or whatever you may have to do with it. It's done. Stop, move on. Exactly that. Assess it as complete. Say, boom, done. Stamp it complete, move on. Things like victory laps and stuff, and breaks to just reminisce and revel in your victory of getting that task done. They're fun here and there, but at the end of the day, that's not productive. It is some time to rest and relax and recharge maybe. And there's definitely, there's a call for that. There's a need for that at times, but generally speaking, you can overdo it. So you want to make sure that your goal should be working through the tasks, and then you should have almost in a way some way to say, once I've gotten a meta task of I've gotten through a larger period of tasks, then I'll celebrate or do a victory lap. Years ago, I've always been a gamer, and years ago, one of the things I did is that I had a list of tasks that I would go through every day, and once my task list was done, then I'd go, sort of as reward, I'd go off and play games for a little bit. Sometimes didn't happen because the day was real long and I couldn't get everything done. Sometimes I was done early. But the key there is, that goes back to if you get the stuff done in 1 hour versus 10 hours, if you're basically paid by getting the stuff done, then, bonus, you've got time to go, take a nap, go for a swim or whatever it is you happen to do. And just to reiterate, understand the difference between complete and perfection. This is where we have tasks that we do that we don't care as much about, I guess, for lack of a better term, and we'll get them done and we'll move on. The things that we care about, it is very easy to get stuck in a cycle where you never complete it. A good example that's, I think, that I've heard from a lot of people is writing a book. There's a lot of people who have gone out, they wrote a book, or starting a business, launching a website or software product, creating a product. In all of these cases, the goal is to get it to a point where you can sell it, or give it to a customer or give it to your end user. And sometimes we care so much about this stuff and we want it to be so accepted that we keep going back to it. We keep refining it. We keep revising it. With software, you have scope creep. So it's like, I should probably add this thing. Oh, I should add this thing. Oh, I should fix that thing. And the next thing you know, it's a death march. It never completes. So always make sure that your completion has some pretty tight definition that helps you kick yourself in the butt and not worry about perfection. Unless, if it has to be perfect, it has to be perfect. But really, I don't know that there's that many things in life that does. Most things in life do not have to be perfect. They just have to be better than the competition. That may be a pessimistic view of life, but it happens to also be, I think, a pretty realistic one if we think about it. Now, again, thinking about the point where we've gotten to the point where we've completed a task, one of the things you want to be able to do is transition easily to the next task, because the granularity is you're not going to do a task a day or a task a week. You probably have a whole little, a little to medium-sized bucket of tasks that you're doing on a daily, weekly basis. You should have a way so that when you've completed one and marked it done, you're ready to go, ready to transition right into the next one. The more smoothly you can transition from task to task, the less you're going to have to worry about time between those suddenly becoming these big gaps that eat up a lot of your space. You don't want to, that's again why you don't want to have tasks that are too small, because there is always a cost of mentally changing gears from one task to the next. So you want to find that sweet spot again where you can quickly transition from task to task, and you're not, and you've accounted for the time that's going to take to transition mentally. And if you order them in a way that the mental transition is not too big, that's going to help a lot. So for example, if you have a lot of bookkeeping tasks, sort of group those together. If you have, let's say, coding tasks, put those together. If you have running errand tasks, put those together. Things where you've got different mindsets, then sort of group those tasks together so that it's a lot easier transition from task to task within that group. And of course, adjust your queue accordingly. So how you've grouped these things, you want to group them by type or by mental area, but you also need to make sure that you've obviously got those listed in a way so that you're going to get your high priority things done and that you're not going to have end up getting moving quickly from a lot of low priority tasks to each other, and at the end of the day, you didn't get the high priority tasks done. And there we have it. That's getting things done, my approach to it. As always, send any questions, comments, requests for assistance, anything like that. If you want, further discussion, you can shoot an email to info@developernoir.com. We have a contact form on the site. You can contact us that way. Or it's available to help you, build your solution at any point in the process and help you find a way to be as productive as possible. Any questions? Comments?
Yeah, I have one.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll send it, but the reason why I sent that question, I'm wondering, like, is there a way you can be productive and not busy, or can you be busy and not being productive?
Yes, definitely. I think that's the biggest problem most people have, is that they're busy and they're not productive. They're working hard at something and they're spending a lot of time on it, but they're not actually moving the ball forward. This is things where, for example, you may be, let's say you've got a project that you're working on, and the goal is to get it out the door, so get it, coded, implemented, and tested. Well, if you go back and you spend a lot of time reviewing the design, once you've got a design, but you're going to go back and review the design, and then once it gets tested, you're going to go back and test it again, or even worse, you're going to go back and you're just going to document all of the tests that were done just to say that the tests were done. That's busy work. That's not productive. That's not helping. It doesn't help the end user. It doesn't help anybody that's part of it. It's just extra work. And so that's, I think, the problem so much of us have, is that we'll be at work, we're doing things. So we're, checking email. That's a great one. Checking email, for the most part, is busy work. I mean, you have to check it periodically. You don't have to check it every 5 minutes. Responding to email. Some people will send stuff back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and it's all this little, they'll nickel and dime you in time. So they'll send you like just a little response, and of course then you spend some time responding back to them, and they spend some time responding back to them, and then you're slowly working your way through this email, when instead it would have been much easier and much more productive for that person to read through everything, get it done, send it on to you, and then you take a look at it. So you're not doing this busyness of talking back and forth, or sitting in a meeting. Sometimes you end up in a meeting and you end up talking circles. You hit the same, you get to a point where a decision's been made, and then you go around the room and everybody essentially says, I agree with the decision that's been made. That's busyness. That's being busy. We're all working on voicing our opinion, but it's not productive, because the decision was made and everybody was good with it anyways. You didn't have to, tag everybody and say, do you agree? Do you agree? Do you agree? You can just as easily say, all right, this is what we're going with. Unless somebody has a reason not to, good. Nobody has a reason not to. Let's move on. That answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Then I had the second one there. How do you prioritize your work? Like, do you go with the easiest first, or do you go with the hardest? Or
honestly, this is a concept they call eating the frog, which is a lot of people do, where you take the hardest or least, like the thing you want to do the least, and put that at the top of your list. Get that done first. I like to do that a lot because, one, that item usually is the riskiest thing. That's the thing that, to me, has the most likelihood or the most potential of taking up my entire day. But it also may not take out that much. So getting that out of the way, it frees me up then to have a better idea how the rest of the day is going to go. And if it's something like that I just don't like doing, the tasks I don't enjoy, it's sort of I get an early reward because I got that thing done and I don't have to deal with it anymore. It's an old adage that's sooner started, sooner done. Like, hey, that way that's not hanging over my head. It's not something I have to worry about. I'm just going to get it, get in there, get it done, knock it out, and then I can move on to the stuff that's more fun.
Okay. And like Rob mentioned in the to the presentation, if you don't have something like that, but you have a lot of general work that you have to do, if you group the tasks by likeness, so like for what I do, for example, so when I have a lot of different coding tasks, I'll try to do all the coding tasks first, then do like documentation later. That way you're in the same mindset going from task to task, because when you switch from like documentation to software, back to documentation, go to a meeting, back and forth, all that back and forth costs you time and startup costs, because every time you have to change focus, you have to, all right, where was I? So you lose a few minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, depending upon the scope of the task. So trying to group similar tasks together, you tend to work through them a lot faster because you're not changing your focus too much. You're basically in the zone and you can work through them.
Okay. So do developers, do they get bored like sometimes with their work on, code? Like when you get in the zone, like let me say, you develop, are you working on code? I mean, you're in the zone. Do you ever get bored with it, or?
Not necessarily bored, but we can get into that trap like Rob was mentioning, where done isn't necessarily done. It's like, oh, maybe I want to go back and tweak this, or I'm not. You could get into that perfectionist habit of where it's done, but you're not done with it. It's like you're your own worst critic. It's like, well, I can make this better. No, you're done. Get it out the door. If they want something different or that it needs to be tweaked, have them come back and tell you it needs to be tweaked. Meet requirements and move on.
Yeah, a good example of that in the developing, the coding world would be comments. Is that as you're going through, you should have a habit of useful comments as you go. But some people will, they'll get to sort of the end of a project, and sometimes they're assigned to do it, is to go back through all of the comments and maybe reformat them, or maybe go to every file that you wrote and put like contact information for the author, or something like that, where it's not really providing a value. And then it's busy work. So like comments would be a great one where it's like, oh, I got all the way done, everything's working. The comments are there, but I realized that I didn't format my comments so they look good in an 80 character width editor. And so now I'm going to go back and I'm going to add in the line feeds to all of them, make them pretty them up. Things like that. They really serve actually anything that's prettying it up, unless you're buying pretty in some way, probably is busy work and probably is not going to be productive. There's and it's pretty for pretty's sake. Now there's sometimes it's pretty for maintainability and things like an organization, but that's a different focus. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I'm making my to-do list now, and it is turning out to be quite filled. I guess when you have a huge to-do list, what are some of the best ways of taking out those tasks that are a little, okay, I could probably backlog that. I guess what's the best? Good night. Okay.
So this is my backlog. Now I get, because one of my weaknesses is I like to be able to check off my things off of my to-do list, and also my memory and what I do is such that I have to write down tasks or I will forget them. Yeah. It's just I have too much going on. So I get very granular, probably almost more I need to. Like here, I've got for this site, I've got that I want to do a blog post for the 21st, 23rd, the 28th, and the 30th. I don't really need to have that, but I do it because I live out of my sprint. So that's my backlog. And so what I do is I'm looking over here on the left side is what I've got to do in the sprint. Now, some of those things, like I said, will not get done. That's just especially because this is the sprint that's actually wrapping up today. So you can see on the left, although I haven't got it completely up to date, there are definitely some tasks that are not going to get done today to finish this thing off, because these are some of these are multi-hour tasks easily. So what I'm going to do is with a task list like that, I actually do, like I said, he has the author would do it in a need to do, can avoid, don't have to do. And that was his too. I tend to do I do a like have to do, want to do, or should do, and then it can wait. Because it can wait. Anything that if you're even thinking, I bet that can wait, it should go in the it can wait. If there's not something that tells you that it needs to be done immediately, then it's obviously not, then it shouldn't be in the immediately thing. And so then when you go to the next one, the I want to do it or I should do it, if there's not something about it that pretty much immediately tells you, yeah, it should be, then push it to the bottom. And when doing that, ideally, what you should do is you should have the most pared down, thin list possible. Because what you did is everywhere that you had an option to drop it, you dropped it. And then look at that list, and if it still has room, if it has gaps or something like that, if there's things that you say, oh, I can still get some more done, then you can go back and look at that bottom list and essentially sort of repeat the process to see if there's anything there that you say, oh, if I've got time, I want to do this. And then you move those up.
Mm-hmm.
And then just sort of work at it. You just keep chipping away at it. Because like I said, over time, I will put things on there that I'm not going to get to for months. It's just, I know I want to get to it sometime, and I want to make sure that I track, that I put down somewhere that, oh yeah, I got to do this. And also the fact that the task exists means that I didn't get it done, because sometimes I have that kind of stuff where it's like, get this thing done, and it's periodic. Like it'd be like an oil change or scheduling a dental appointment or doctor's checkup or something like that. There's those kinds of things that you do them over and over again throughout the period of your life. And then as you get old, like me, you forget, did I do that last week? Did I do it a year ago? Did I do it 10 years ago? And so you keep that on your list. So it's like, oh yeah, I haven't done that recently, so I need to go ahead and knock that thing out. Or at least remember that I got to do it in the near future. Does that help?
Yes, sir. Yeah. I didn't think about pruning it down. It's that interface you have there is much like Trello that I've seen. I guess I don't know who did it first, but that's good.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's been around for a while. I mean, I think this actually I think all comes from the Agile people.
Yeah.
And Trello, Trello, and I think Trello's is exactly the same. It's either it's to do, it's in progress, or it's done. And this is the same way, and that's the same way it is on, if you think of the Kanban boards for Agile, is it's either it's on the, it's over there where it's one of those little Post-it notes on the board where I'm going to, it's got to be done. I grab it, and that means somebody's working on it. And then when I'm done, I go put it over on the done board. And so, it's that idea. And this is really, it's, at the end of the day, the left is your inbox, the right is your outbox. And then in between, it's what I'm working on, basically.
Yeah.
And for me, I guess actually to follow that up a little bit, the nice thing about having something like this, and Trello is another good one like that, where you can sort of queue up what you're working on. This goes back to what Michael was just saying about transitioning from task to task, and also from being able to quickly move from task to task. When I do this is basically like, this is what I'm working on right now. So if I complete something, or if I get dragged away, I can come back and I can look at this thing and say, oh yeah, that's the thing I was working on. So it allows me to more quickly get back up to speed with whatever it was I was doing earlier.
Yeah, good deal.
So will that lead to like procrastinating sometimes?
It doesn't for me. Why would you think it would lead to procrastinating? Just being able to leave it on your in progress for a while?
Yeah, like you just continue putting like throwing tasks on the side, and you're like, okay, I'll get back to that. Next thing you know, just keeps piling up, and you're like, oh, I should have done this maybe.
That's a good one. It is, with all of these things, you can abuse any of these processes. So you could do that. You could just have, I'm working on everything. But that, again, that goes to where that's not productive. It's where you ask yourself, is this actually helping me at all? And if all I do is take everything on my to-do list and put it on my I'm doing it list, then it hasn't really helped me, because I still have to get it done. And that means I got to look at what am I doing, what's on my doing list, and find it. And then for me, at that point, then you just have a to-do and a done list. You don't really need the middle one there, the in progress. For me, I use the in progress, like I said, because it's a way for me to, because I have to multitask. I have to bounce between tasks. That's just unfortunately part of my my daily routine and some of the things I do. And some of these are things where it's like it's almost like that in progress is my to-do today. Which is where I look at this as I start my day. I'll look at stuff and say, yeah, I definitely need to get to this and this and this, because I have essentially categories of work that I'm going to do on a given day. And so what I do is I move the key task for that category ends up in my in progress queue for that day. So for example, today, one of the things I want to do is work on Blessing Not Stressing. So if you look 3 down there that says July newsletter. So if I get around to the Blessing Not Stressing stuff, that's what I'm going to work on, is the July newsletter. And so that tells me, and now some of these tasks won't get done in a day because they're bigger tasks. Like the one above it, this advanced appointment logic task, is actually a multi-day task. But every time I work with this thing, that's my time matters, that's the thing it's like, oh yeah, that's what I'm working on. So it allows me to, more quickly look at this and say, yep, that's where I want to go, jump into it and dive into that. In some tasks, some things you do, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's like when you go to it, you know what you're doing. But in others, you don't. Like if you're working on a big project and you're, maybe you're doing maintenance and you're doing some new development, and then you've got some testing to do, you may be all over the place within that project. So, just because it's like, oh yeah, I'm going to work on that project, that may not help you at all in directing you at where you want to go, what task you specifically want to work on. Something like this is how I do that. It allows me to more quickly jump directly to where the work is that I want to work on. And again, I tend to be a little absent-minded at times with this kind of stuff. So this is where, I use this to offset that. So I don't sit there and stare at a task and go, which one of these did I want to do? Or which one was I working on? Something like that. It allows me to just say, oh yeah, I'm going to go to this category of stuff. Boom, I'm off and running.